latest episode of Home Three Things with our sterling co-host, Mr. Joakim Noah, live from beautiful Las Vegas. We were just talking about it being cold there. What's going on, man?
Man, listen, I would have had no idea it ever got cold in Las Vegas. It's freezing. Everybody's wearing sweaters. It's very weird.
Okay. Walk us through. We're going to get to a lot of basketball, but we need a highlight that you can share on the show from the last 36 hours.
Well, I had a blackjack night with Michael Phelps, Chandler Parson, and Blake Griffin. I've never gambled before, so they were giving me full tutelage on how to play the game. So I learned. It was interesting crew.
Don't take this the wrong way, because you don't strike me as like a gambler, but I'm surprised that you haven't, like, your skill set would probably lend itself, your brain would probably lend itself to some version of gambling and those. Have you just never been into it?
Bro, like, those guys are playing, Tommy, and I'm freaking out when I'm seeing them like lose money. I'm sweating cold. Like, that's why I don't gamble. Like, I never gambled on the plane. And, a lot of guys, they play cards on the plane. Like, that's kind of like the team building, camaraderie thing. But I don't know. I just never got into it.
Basketball, because we have a lot to talk about the game Tuesday night. You were there Saturday. What were your initial thoughts from each game? Just being on the ground, sitting right next to the bench, like what were, on a 100,000 feet level. What do you think?
Honestly, I think that it's an amazing event. We came into the Emirates, obviously Emirates Cup semifinal. We're sitting courtside right next to the bench. So I'm sitting next to the Atlanta Hawks, and we're sitting next to the Houston Rockets. So I really got to see how the guys interact during timeouts, and it's just been a while. I felt like I was sitting on a bench. It's been the first time.
Did you want to start talking?
I was like, our boy Tari Eason hit a three, and the other team calls timeout, and he's my guy. I really love the way he's been balling. So, I'm just like getting hype with him. Like, I was like a fan out there. It was amazing.
Let's start, I think, with, we're going to get to the Houston OKC in a second, but let's start with Milwaukee. Seeing them, what did you think? What did you just think about them sort of offensively initially?
Well, you could just tell, like, Giannis is just very comfortable. He's getting whatever he wants. He's getting to the basket at will. You can tell that 500 racks right now, guys really, really want that money. The incentive was a really, really smart move by the NBA. You hear the benches, getting into it. Everybody's into it. You usually don't see games like that this early in the regular season. So I think it's a really smart move that the NBA did. Dame's shooting the ball real well. He looks very comfortable in his role, knowing when to take shots, giving, just really orchestrating the offense, and obviously, like, Giannis in the fast break is like, it's dominant and almost unstoppable.
Yeah. Now that you're up close with it, because you haven't seen him in person in a minute. We were talking about this last week about just his level of physicality. But then also, like we talked about last week, him in the mid range, and he's made that jump. Did you see? Was there a version of them offensively that you could see just the level of confidence, but then also just how they were setting things up, knowing that he's shooting 48% now from mid ranges. Obviously, that's a career high, and he's shooting 61% from the field for the year, which is also up there as a career high for him. So, did you see them setting things up differently offensively?
I mean, I think that he definitely, from what I saw him hit a few big ones at the end of the game, some tough ones that he definitely wasn't making earlier in his career. He definitely is a lot more comfortable with that shot. But his dominance getting to the rim and finishing at the rim, I don't see anybody stopping that. So the mid-range is still secondary. The primary offense is still getting the ball at Giannis and him just bulldozer down to the hoop.
Joe, obviously your super fandom for the Rockets has been well established at this point, but seeing the Thunder up close for the first time, just their physicality, what were your initial thoughts watching just how they connect as a team?
Well, this is a team that's got some continuity, played some big games in the playoffs. Shai's their leader. I think they're very clear on where the ball needs to go at the end of the game. But I mean, that Hardenstein, like he outplayed Sengun in that game. I think that was like definitely the difference. I really felt like Sengun should have won that matchup, but Hardenstein won that matchup, and it was the difference between winning and losing.
Can we talk? We talked about this before when he was hurt, before he was playing a little bit, but how he unlocks their offense a little bit, and he did this in New York last year too. And I kind of don't think he gets enough credit for it. Even when you just compare the way that they were great offensively last year, in a lot of respects, but it was a lot of like Shai ISOs, backdoor cutting, spot up threes and things like that. They're running a lot through him now in a way that New York was doing as well last year. I'm not sure that necessarily people. I think everyone knew how good he was, defensively and from a rebounding perspective, but offensively, to your point, that's been a thing which is a real difference maker for them.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because Shai's such a dominant player. They're putting two on the ball on the pick, and Hardenstein is just like he's a great passer. So the ball's moving. He's not holding the ball. He's making quick decisions. And as a center, for somebody who's that comfortable with with the ball in his hands, making plays, it's all the difference. He gets that little short pocket pass and attacks the rim.
What do you think? You've been in that spot, obviously. And so it's hard for you to, all you can do is kind of speak for yourself to a certain extent. But what do you think the key is for the guys around the big to do when you have a center who can move the ball like that?
I mean, I think that's something that you work on every day in practice. Get to the open spot. I think guys are ready to shoot the ball. You can tell that this is a team that's well organized. Like I said, a lot of these guys have played together for a long time, and now you add somebody like Hardenstein. And look, let's not forget, one of their best players is hurt. He's not even playing in big fella.
Yeah.
So
it's what's scary. It's what's scary when you think about Chet. You think about how dominant Chet was in a lot of respects at the beginning of the year. Adding him to this mix, they're not going to be fun to play against.
They're not going to be fun. And Chet's so skilled, he can play forward too.
Yeah.
So. But the thing that would really impress me is how comfortable Shai is at the end of the game, and you almost have to double him. And then it's for the other guys to go in and do what they do. All their roles are just very defined, and they look like a well-oiled machine.
Did you know that Lou Dort has never made an all defensive team?
Yeah, I think that's going to change real quick.
I found that out this weekend, and I just find that, I don't know, maybe people have known that before. It seems hard to believe with how established his reputation is. I feel like with the, not just players, everybody around the league who's sort of around him and around that team.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Dort. I just his style of play, his competitive spirit, his strength. He's out there, trying to get rebounds on centers, ripping the basketball out of people's hands. It's interesting to see when being up close, just to see his physicality and the way he plays and his competitive spirit. It's impressive. And
it seems like we saw a little bit at the end of the game, but he's been great for them all year. Guys like Case and Wallace, we talked about J-Dub already. Caruso's back. They're managing his minutes a little bit, I feel like, to work him back into it. But they're almost, it's almost like a football team. They're going to come in and they're just going to they're going to just wear on you after a while. It's like a team with with Derrick Henry with a really good running back. Did you see that up close at all?
I'm a Rockets guy. I'm the Rockets guy, but I can tell that you really like OKC, man.
It's hard. It's impossible not to. I'm trying to be unbiased, but I look at them and I'm like, look what you just described. Look at what they've done this year. They haven't had one game with all these guys playing.
Mm. It's impressive.
They haven't had one game with all these guys playing, and they also they can just beat you in all these different ways. It's one thing if if you have the best player in the league and he's going for 38 every night and you win, or you're the best 3-point shooting team in the league or whatever it is. But it feels like they can beat you depending on who the opponent is.
It's crazy, and big shout out to Coach Mark too. He was in Florida with Coach Donovan for a little bit. So I would come back in the summertime and train at Florida, and he would do my my workouts, and I always felt like I got so much better with him, and just to see him shining and leading that team, it's really really cool to watch. So shout out to Coach Mark.
What do you think? That's interesting. I didn't realize that he was there with you. What do you think? Like obviously he's learned a lot since then, but what do you think? What do you remember details wise, about your work together at that point, and sort of how that's translated to what he's brought onto this team?
But I think, a lot of the work I was doing in the summer at that time was just working because I was in a similar situation where people were trying to get the ball out of Derrick Rose's hands. So I was always in a position where Derrick would make that small pass, and then I was in a three on four position, and that's really where I shined and was able to make plays and be able to create a little bit. So that was my game. So we worked a lot on that, and I see the same similarities with Hardenstein for sure.
Do you see the similarities with Shai and Derek?
I mean, I do. They're just dominant players. You know, guys that are so good in a one-on-one situation that you have to put two on the ball. Very comfortable with the ball in their hands at the end of the game. Um, I do not want that guy comfortable going at you full speed at the end of a game.
I think that's a good segue to the preview for Tuesday night. Now that you've seen these two teams up close, Milwaukee and OKC, kind of, we're not making predictions. Just want initial thoughts. No more
Yo,
predictions.
my predictions suck.
No more predictions. But
The next time we do predictions, you got to get in there.
I'm doing the predictions. I mean, I'll do the predictions this time. But what I'm saying is, before we get to the predictions, I think that's a good when we talk about Milwaukee trying to slow down Shai and OKC trying to slow down Giannis. When we look at those keys overall, if you're judging that objectively, is there one thing that stands out for each team? You're not going to stop either of these guys; they're too good. Like you mentioned with Derek, it's like there's only so much you can do. But what do you do to limit them?
One thing that I thought was interesting is the point guard matchup is so important, right? The Dame versus Shai. But like even in the last game, I thought, it's Trae Lillard, and they're not guarding each other. And I remember Pooh being the type of person who would always say, like, I'm not running from no matchup. Because we also had Kirk Heinrich. And sometimes Kirk would guard the point guard, and it would drive Derek crazy. He was like, I'm the point guard. I want to guard the point guard. That's my matchup. And he took that personally, The league has changed in that aspect where it's not, the matchup doesn't matter as much to the guys.
Yeah, but with when we talk about the length of the Thunder and seeing what Giannis is able to, I kind of wanted to, I don't want to skip ahead to this, but seeing what Giannis was able to do with the head of steam. Do you front him? Do you deny him? You're like, looking at that personnel, because it does feel like if you're OKC, not to keep gassing them, which I'm going to keep doing. if you're OKC and he's not scoring 8 points. You're not going to be like, we're not taking him completely out of the game, but you can just maybe not let him get 35. You know what I mean? Like you can just get him out of rhythm a little bit. With the rest of the talent they have around them, they're going to be in a pretty good spot. And so if you're looking at that from like a strategy standpoint, is there a key that you are just like, knowing their personnel, and these teams don't play each other much, so makes it fun in a way, because that does give it a little bit more of like a finals vibe. How you can figure out how to make him uncomfortable.
A lot easier said than done on a podcast.
Yep.
But if I'm Mark, I'm probably starting Dort on Giannis, and that's an interesting matchup because I think that Giannis is also used to, being the strongest person at his position. He's not stronger than Dort. Like he's not backing that guy down like that easy. So he could shoot over him, but I think that, you never know. I think that's the only way to slow down Giannis is making him, even though the percentages are in his favor, you got to make him shoot a lot more jump shots. I think the last game, I saw him shoot like 3 or 4 okay, he made 50%, but he had 8 layups.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So if you put Lou on him, and you can kind of have the combination of Hartenstein and Jalen kind of like showing double and then switching off, just making, but rather than having a big on him who he's just going to drive by, who he's just going to be quicker than, feels like it. I mean, that's the luxury. I feel like OG Anunoby's like this for the Knicks too. When you have a guy who's just that strong, who you can throw him on a big, just to kind of like get in their way a bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that Dort probably primary defender, obviously like always showing bodies. But I think that like it's gonna be interesting to see what Lillard does. I think he shot the ball great in the semis. And look, this is do or die. It's one game. This isn't a playoff series where the numbers usually balance out. This is one game all out, and that's why this Emirates Cup's been so fun to watch, because it's do or die and guys are competing at a really high level, and obviously anything can happen in one game. So, you know, it's hard to make predictions in one game. I think that in a series it's a little easier. But I'm interested to see that matchup between Dort and Giannis.
Do you, before we move on to our last two topics, do you have any X factors who are sort of more under the radar guys that you feel like either from Saturday, or you just think with either of these teams that you think are going to make an impact Tuesday?
Yeah, I think Caruso is going to have a big game. I think he's going to come in. I think they're daring him to shoot a little bit. But he's also somebody who's played in some big games. He's a champion, and I think he understands what's at stake, and I think he's going to have a big one.
Other NBA news over the weekend: FIBA legend, honestly, a NBA legend as well at this point. He's had an amazing career. Dennis Schröder, traded from Brooklyn to the Golden State Warriors. He was traded for D'Anthony Melton and 3 second-round picks. How do you see him fitting in with Steph and those guys?
I think this is going to be an easy fit. Schroeder's a very competitive guy, somebody who can shoot the three, somebody who defends, somebody who I think is going to be really good in those slips. When Draymond has the ball in the post and they play that high split action.
So them running the, do you and you see, there was a stat I saw earlier today. He's averaging 5+ drives per game. He's going to lead their second unit. He's averaging 5 per game. He obviously has always had a great first step, and he's shooting 40% from three this year. So he's been shooting better than his career averages. And so you think in that action with Steph, it's going to be a pretty seamless fit. Sort of what it feels like.
I think so. One thing I've always been impressed about with Steph is how fast he lets go of the ball. He's always trying to pitch the ball up. He'll throw it to Draymond, how good he is at screening, in transition. You usually don't see that from from a point guard, And I think Schroeder is somebody who's really, really fast with the ball. And I think we're going to see Steph off the ball a lot more. And I think it's just going to make their team that much better.
Personality-wise, I feel like he's we were talking about this with Dylan Brooks a couple of weeks ago. He's just a gamer. Like you can see it in every locker room he goes to. He hits big shots. He's hit big shots they won FIBA. Germany won FIBA in the Philippines a couple of years ago in the World Cup and the Olympics. Going to like a championship team, it feels like that is kind of a fit as well, right? Just from a pure, like, this is just a guy that's been in a lot of big moments.
He's been in big moments. He's also been in on some teams that weren't great. And to me, that shows me a lot. Like when you're on a team like Brooklyn that's struggling and you've had early success, like you won the world championship, sometimes those situations are tough. And I have to respect the way that he competes on a night in and night out basis. I think is great. And now you're in a position where you have an opportunity to play for a championship and play in some big games again. I think this is his game's going to elevate even more.
You smartly don't spend very much time on the internet or on social media or anything like that. But one funny thing we were talking about on our text thread over the weekend is Laker fans are pissed that they didn't bring him back, even though they've had him twice. They've had him twice and they've given away twice, and then both times they're like, bring him back. So it's like the third time, it's like at a certain point, like, I don't know what you're gonna do.
What a bummer. Fans are always pissed about something.
Last topic, I think that we feel like we wanted to hit on very briefly. Memphis Grizzlies. They lost last night to LA, but they've been awesome, in the last 10. They're 8-2 in their last 10. Edie's back. Was 13-10 last night, 8 offensive rebounds. Offensively, they've just been they've always been good when Ja's played, but they've been even better so far this year. When you've watched them, in passing so far, what are your thoughts been there? And, has your perspective on them changed at all in the last, 6 weeks or so?
No, I'm impressed with Memphis. Obviously, it starts with Ja, and you got to give him his flowers, man. He had a rough, 15 months, and for him to come back and play with that chip on his shoulder, you can tell he's leading that team. And you got Marcus Smart, who's playing at a high level. Shout out to my boy Jarren, who's playing at a high level too. So they're always a team that's a little under the radar. I think it's, playing on the small market, playing for Memphis, but in transition, Ja is just, he's on another level. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see what they do in their sets. I think having Baines and Ja play together for a long time last year without Ja it could end up helping them in the future. I think they built a lot of chemistry last year, playing in that pick and roll. But we'll have to see when the game slows down in the playoffs. And that's easier said than done because Ja is so fast with the ball. But when the game slows down in the playoffs, can they make it happen in the half court?
You've spent a good amount of time, around the city, around the team, everything like that. But this coaching staff in particular, they're another one that it seems like, Jalen Williams is an example this year. Scottie Pippen Jr. is an example this year. They are very good at, finding guys that maybe are a little under the radar in other places and bringing them in there and then having them be really good and contribute, really early. What is it about the culture there you think that allows them to sort of keep doing this?
Well, I think that Memphis is never going to be a place that's going to bring in the top free agents, So it's kind of like the last stop. And I think that's why a lot of guys go there with a real chip on their shoulder because they know it's do or die. And I think that it's also the way the city is, I think that when you go out there, you got to play with that grit. And, shout out to Tony Allen and Zebo, for instilling this like grit and grind mentality that, those guys are still playing with today.
I think before we go, we should shout out Jarren as well. You mentioned him very briefly. He's had a great year so far. You get along. You're very close to him on a personal level. He's not slept on at this point. He's one defensive player of the year, but it also feels like people don't appreciate his greatness in real time. And so I'm just curious, like as you talk with him, as you see him play, what is it about him that you think makes him so effective?
I mean, that's my rook. Shout out to my rook, Jaren Jackson. I really enjoyed playing with him. He's has an infectious personality, somebody that very easy to get along with, somebody who cares about the community. I think somebody who's like very proud to represent Memphis.
Very funny too.
Very funny guy. Very funny guy. Very easy to be around with. And look, he got left hand hook, he got right hand hook, he got 3-pointer, he can get a defensive rebound and bring it up the court. He's got a lot. He's got a lot going on. And the thing with Memphis is you don't see them a lot. You don't see them a lot on TV. But like Ja's back, Jaren's playing at a high level. They're going to be a tough out come playoffs.
All right, we're going to wrap it here. I think I said no predictions, but I lied. I'm going to make a prediction.
I know who you got.
Yeah. Tuesday night, I'll go first. I can't pick against the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think Giannis is going to go off. I think Dame is going to go off. I think Taurean Prince, we should shout out, shooting 53% from 3 on the year, leading the league, had an amazing year. I think the Bucks are going to put up a great fight, but I think OKC is too much. What do you think?
You want to bet $20?
Yes.
Okay, let's bet 20.
Right.
I'll take Milwaukee.
Lock it in.
I'm coming to New York to get that 20.
Lock it in. A Pura Vida Miami smoothie. That's the bet. All right, man. Have fun tonight.
All right, man. Peace.